Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing how to build a free little pantry for your local community. My lips are numb, it's cold. I've actually built a couple of these in years past, and every one that I build is a little bit different, which is kind of the cool thing about this project. There's 100 sizes, shapes, or styles that you can build them. This one is quite a bit bigger than the ones that I've built in the past, but it's also simpler and I feel like more practical in design. So if you're looking for a great way to give back this season or year-round, let's dive in and get building. To get started, I grabbed a sheet of 3/4 inch, well, it was actually 23/32 inch sheathing. I debated on using treated plywood for this, which would be better for out in the elements, but all of the sheets at my store were super wet, so it would be a long time before I was able to paint them. So that's why I ended up going with this sheathing. After a few coats of outdoor paint, it'll hold up just fine. I've got the detailed cut list in the plans linked below, but after ripping off a strip about 20 inches wide, I cut 2 side panels with a 22.5-degree slope. I just used my speed square to mark the slope, then I cut this with my circular saw and Craig AccuCut. I just copied the shape to cut the other side, and I also cut a bottom piece to run between them. Next, I cut a back panel with a 22.5-degree beveled top edge to match the slope of the sides. Now that I had these 4 pieces cut, I sanded them, then carefully screwed the pieces together to make a box. I made sure to pre-drill all of my holes before driving the screws, and I attached the sides and bottom first, making sure that the sides were sloped the same direction. Then I could lay this on the floor and attach the back panel, making sure that the bevel was also sloped the same direction as the sides. Next, I cut some pieces to make the shelves to go on the inside. I figured that these would be a little bit easier to add without the top, so I'll come back to the top later. You can lay out the inside shelves however you'd like, so feel free to switch this up, but I added a large top shelf and then divided the bottom sections into smaller cubbies. Bubs was very helpful for this process, as you can see. So I screwed in the top shelf through the side panels. I could have used pocket hole screws here instead, but I just didn't have any exterior rated pocket hole screws at the time, so either way works fine. Then I added a small shelf on the left side. Some scrapwood spacer blocks were really helpful here to keep it square. And finally, I could secure the middle divider through the top and bottom. At this point, I could move on to attaching the top. I cut this top piece to overhang each side a few inches to hopefully help protect the sides from rain. At this point, it was time to trim this out. I had some treated wood fence pickets left over in the shop from an old project, so I ripped these into strips to trim the sides. If you wanted, you could use treated 1x2s or 1x3s or even cedar boards to trim this instead. Basically, this trim just adds a little dimension, but it will also help cover and seal the gaps on the joints. So I cut to fit, then glued and nailed these pieces onto the corners of the box, mitering the ends at the top 22.5 degrees to match the slope. I also beveled the top end of the back vertical pieces the same angle. After the corners were trimmed, I cut to fit the top and bottom pieces to run between them. For the front, I cut to fit a leftover piece of 3/4 inch plywood to about 3.5 inches wide with one edge beveled 22.5 degrees, again, to match the slope, so that it would fit snugly across the top. I glued and tacked this piece on with a few brad nails, then I added some screws just for a little extra hold. Probably not necessary, but oh well. And then it was ready for paint. I caulked over all of the cracks, crevices, corners, joints, and screws with an exterior rated paintable caulk. And while I do want this to look as nice as it can, it's more important that the cracks be sealed, so I made sure to cover everything well and allowed it to dry completely before priming. I know some of you will say that I should have caulked after priming. Maybe so, but this is fine. I did add a little bit more caulk after priming in a few spots that I had missed. Then I painted with an exterior paint, making sure to cover every surface well to seal it. While that dried, I moved on to building the door. For that, I used some cedar 1x3s and I cut 4 pieces to make a frame that would be large enough to cover the entire front of the pantry. I glued this door frame together using wood glue and dowels. And once that was dry, I stained it with an outdoor stain and sealant. Then I carefully cut a piece of acrylic to cover the opening. So I've got my plexiglass piece cut to fit on the door, and I'm going to be attaching them with these stainless steel screws. I'm gonna pre-drill some holes, and I basically just need to pre-drill something that's bigger than the threads but smaller than the head. And I've used my Craig multi-mark to mark about 1/2 inch from the edge, 3 on this side, 3 on this side, 3 on that side, and 3 on this side. So there should be, what is that, 12? 12 screws total, which is the number of screws that I have, so. Okay, so after I busted my plexiglass the first time, I have now decided to use a piece of scrap wood underneath it to support it so it doesn't crack and bust when you drill the holes. So I've got the plexiglass attached to the door. I'm gonna come back and put some kind of a bead of something to seal between the wood and the plexiglass, just because it's still a little flexible in between the screws. But the door fits onto the cabinet. So some friends of ours just built a shed, like an outbuilding, and he's got some leftover shingles. So I'm going to load this box up, run it over to his house, and get the shingles put on real quick. It's currently like sleeting / snowing, so we're really kind of in a hurry. I'm not gonna drag my camera along and make this take longer than it needs to. We're just gonna go get the shingles put on, bring it right back. Okay, so we're back and the shingles are on. We added drip edge on all 4 sides, then put a row of starter shingles along the bottom and along the top, and then we also added some on each side, so it basically like framed out the edge of the roof. Then we just added some shingles on top. The nails here at the top where we nailed this last row of shingles in, we covered with some through the roof, and now the roof is finished. So one of the things though that we realized when we were installing the roof is that the shortest nails we could find were 7/8 inches long, which was still long enough to go through the shingles and poke out the bottom side of the roof, since the roof is just 3/4 inch plywood. So we didn't want, obviously, sharp edges of nails like sticking out at the bottom, and especially not on the inside where people would be like reaching in to grab stuff. So we ended up trimming the nails like with some side cutters, like heavy duty side cutters. We trimmed the roofing nails just a little bit shorter. That way when we nailed them in, they wouldn't come out the other side. So that's just something if you're installing a shingled roof on one of these to keep in mind. If you didn't want to install shingles, you definitely don't have to. If you had some sheet metal, you could put that on top. If you wanted to put like cedar shingles on top, you could. If you wanted to just leave it painted and just put a very good coat of paint on the top, the paint would also be sufficient, probably at least for a while. After the roof was installed onto the pantry, I brought the door back to the workbench and I added a bead of silicone between the acrylic and the frame. This will help seal the door from the weather so that the rain won't run inside of it. But I still didn't attach the door just yet. First, I wanted to get the pantry installed onto the post. Since this pantry box is rather large, I cut some support braces from my treated 4x4 post with ends mitered 45 degrees. I put one of these on each side of the post toward the top. These were a bit tricky to install so that it was flush across the top. I screwed one on each side using a scrap board to help me position them, and that didn't really work great. So then I flipped it upside down on the workbench to see if that was any better. I got all 4 pieces attached, but they didn't end up being level all across the top. So I tried flipping it right side up, clamped the post to the side of my workbench, and then used a scrap piece of plywood on top to help me make sure that each piece was on the same plane. I found this method much easier. Now that the post was ready, I went out to the field to find a place to set it. Now, this is not where it's actually going, but where it's going is in a neighborhood with a lot of houses, and I just didn't want to get people's houses in the background of my video. So I'm just demonstrating it here so that you get the idea. That said, after digging my hole to 24 inches deep, I set the post in and filled it back up with dirt. When we set this permanently, instead of using dirt, I'll fill the hole with concrete mix and let that set up for a few days. Then, once it's set, I can come back and add the pantry box on top. I made sure that the box was centered, then screwed it onto each support and the center post. After I finish this video, I can just unscrew this from the post so that we can actually move it to where it's going. But at this point, I was ready to add the door. So I installed some butt hinges to the edge of my door, then I attached it to the cabinet. And to keep it tightly closed, I added a chest door latch style catch to the other side. And with that, this free little pantry is ready to fill up. I'm really excited to get this placed, and I truly hope it's a help to our local community. This design allows for some smaller items like the canned goods in the bottom and larger packaged items at the top, so we can fill it with food, diapers, and other items to help those who need it. I hope this video gave you a little inspiration for a small but practical way to give back locally, and I truly appreciate you watching. I've got lots more projects and videos to share soon, so I hope you stay tuned. And until next time, friends, happy building.